Hello, everybody, and welcome back. My name is Dr. Jenica Paz, and I'm delighted to return for the Women's Resource Center Parenting Newsletter How to Talk About series. This month, the theme has to do with gender and toxic masculinity and related concepts. You all provided some really wonderful, thought-provoking, and meaningful questions, and I did my best to string together these themes and created sort of a conversation for us today. So just as with our topic last month, how to talk about race with our children, I imagine today this is only going to begin to skim the surface of the depth and complexity that is inherently within this topic of gender. So if you don't already have a warm beverage such as some tea or coffee, go ahead and grab one and cozy up, and let's go ahead and get this conversation started. We, in fact, are a product of our own lived experiences. Thus, oftentimes, what is de facto passed on to our own children stems from these deep-rooted and fixed ideals of normal that have been perpetuated since the colonization of the land in which we inhabit. There's a lack of awareness, or perhaps it's a more so willful ignorance, as to the fact that the existence of gender fluidity and nonconformity have long existed in several cultures outside of Westernized societies. Among some Native and Indigenous tribes, prior to the influences and destruction imposed by colonization, children were provided the freedom to express and align their chosen gender. And this was not only common, but it was accepted. And those with two-spirit identities represented a healthy community, and this was well respected. Countless examples exist across several other cultures as well, such as the Mahu among Hawaiians, who embody both a male and female spirit, to the presence of a third gender or gender neutral in the Sanskrit grammar, from which numerous Hindu mythology and epics includes reference to, such as individuals aligned with a third gender were once regarded as being revered or close to the gods. It is important to remember these customs, they were silenced by colonizers due to it being an unfamiliar practice to them. It is not okay that we have steered so far away from the roots that once embraced and celebrated all identities. It is not okay that we have medical professionals in the early 1980s who affixed pathology to individuals who were born with a biological sex that did not align with how their hearts and minds think and feel. It is not okay that we have to wait until a person experiences dysphoria or distress from not feeling safe or accepted by society to be themselves before they can undergo gender-affirming surgery. It is not okay that we have harmful laws and bills that aim to cut off our youth from being able to use the restroom or participate in activities or interests or serve our nation due to their colonist mindsets, which shame and silence which is simply different from them. It is not okay when clients I have worked with have had to thank me for being nice to them, for letting them be themselves, because they're used to a world in which their classmates threaten to kill them, their extended family members are embarrassed of them, and they are filled with weekly thoughts of self-harm or suicide. It is not okay. I am both personally and professionally invested in this topic and committed to disrupting and dismantling the gender policing that seeps into every crevice or influence of our children's development. Growing up, I had multiple siblings and close family members who experienced undue harassment and endured emotional and psychological distress due to their gender expression and LGBTQIA+ identities. I will always remember when I was around 8 or 9 years old, I was standing in line with one of my older siblings at a fudge candy shop in Big Bear, California. My sibling was next in line to purchase her assortment of yummy candies and fudge when the cashier said something along the lines of, "All right, young man, I can help you next." I remember my jaw dropping, and I quickly asserted, "That's my sister, she's a girl." My sibling laughed it off, but it really bothered me. And at that age, 8 or 9, children have a strong desire for understanding the rules of the world around them, and they're thinking in terms of categorization and labeling, because it helps them make better sense and organization of the world. Professionally, I've been transformed by one youth in particular who I worked with years ago, who demonstrated to me the powerful impact that simple acceptance and celebration of identity can have on a child who identifies as gender fluid or non-conforming. Riley, and this is a pseudonym, was 14 when I first started working with them. Riley came from a white conservative background, and their parents were raised in the Bible Belt in the US South. One session, Riley's grandmother actually joined us because she wanted to know how to better understand Riley and be there for them. She began to tell me a story of when Riley was 3 years old. She remembered helping get her grandson ready for bed, and she was starting to lead him through his nightly prayers. When it was Riley's turn, she remembers Riley turning and saying, "Dear God, please let me wake up tomorrow and be a girl because I want to be a girl." For Riley, their sense of gender identity was apparent as young as around age 3, at which time Riley also started to naturally gravitate away from the stereotypical boy clothing or boy toys and asked to try on other kinds of clothing, such as skirts and dresses, and playing with dolls and makeup. As is typical with adolescent development, it wasn't until Riley approached their teen years when they were able to more confidently describe their identity and gender expression, which was at times expressed as female and other times as more fluid. As a way to foster this identity development, a helpful activity I implemented was using an old school abacus toy for which there are multiple rows with 10 or so beads in each row. For each row, I provided an area of identity, such as gender expression, gender identity, sexual orientation or attraction, interests and hobbies, and so on. The activity was to have Riley move over the number of beads across each row that best represented their sense of self on the continuum of male to female or even more neutral. This was a really powerful communication tool for Riley, as it allowed them to see a tactile representation of the multiple components that make up one's identity. With younger children, introducing them to the concept of the gingerbread person, which is, here we go on this side, which is what I have the graphic displayed in the back here. You can use the gingerbread person as another great way to start this conversation and help children visualize the different ways that a person can think, feel, and express themselves, which are all healthy, normal, and valued. There are several ways in which we can all play a part in cultivating a more gender inclusive environment, and it really begins with starting to be mindful about the language that we use and the behavior that we model to our children. Conversations about gender begin well before birth. Those gender reveal parties that have become so popular and sensationalized, and the toys that are pre-selected for your babies based on their biological sex and predetermined gender identity. With our very young babies and toddlers, communication is going to happen through play and modeling. Children are just not born with a fixed understanding of their gender identity. Instead, it's automatically fed to them by their society and their surroundings. With very young children, we want to be sure to provide ample opportunities for them to be exposed to and interact with a variety of toys. I also really suggest engaging in child-led play and in joining their world to see what kinds of themes or talk they bring up during play, and use those as moments as powerful teaching times to help your child learn that there is a space for all types of toys and characters in your house. If you have a male child and they're gravitating towards princess dolls, let it be. Disrupt toxic masculine comments such as "boys don't play with dolls because those are for little girls," "boys play with trucks and they are big and strong," something like that. When you hear it, call it out and help replace it with something else, such as children can play with whatever toys they would like, so long as they are not harming anyone else's body when they play. Fathers can join in their sons with playing with baby dolls, for example, by modeling how to parent the baby, because you know one day your child may grow up to be a parent themselves, and modeling how to make kind, gentle comments to a baby and take care of its needs is very important to model for your baby. It's helpful for healthy development overall for our children. As your child becomes interested in pretend play, you can also support gender inclusive language and ideals through using more inclusive descriptions of the characters they are wanting to dress up as. So, for example, a firefighter rather than fireman, a postal worker rather than a postman, a police officer rather than policeman. It's also helpful to model this naming in everyday language as well. So if your spouse or other family members or caregivers use these traditional stereotyped language. It's okay to parrot back a more inclusive term so that your child grows up hearing both and understanding that there's a place for everyone. Understanding there might have been a period of time in which these fixed labels existed, but also helping recognize and champion space for new, more inclusive language to develop and to hopefully be replaced. Watching movies, shows, or reading books together, those are also good times to be able to ask some more open-ended questions to your child, such as, why do you think the author or director might have made the movie this way? It's helpful to engage frequently and intentionally about these discussions of gender and sexism, while making connections with values that are important to your family. So, for example, you might call out toxic masculinity depicted in some kind of media and say something like, it used to be that only men were allowed to do certain jobs, but that was very wrong. And people learned that this was wrong. And now today, we know that women always have been able to and can do any job that they want. Or something else like, all right, so in that part of pausing the movie, in that part of the movie, Joey's dad told him that boys don't cry and that he needs to suck it up and act like a man. But in our family and with our friends, we know it's okay to show your feelings, show care for others, and ask for help when, show care for others when they are sad or upset, and ask for help when it's needed. We need to do good in our world for all children so that they do not grow up to inherit or perpetuate harmful traits such as toxic masculinity, which have had, as recent events again and again remind us, have had lethal consequences, from mass shootings and gun violence, targeted misogyny and homophobia. We are at a space and time in history to be able to move the pendulum away from these harmful traditionalist and supremacist values onto a more safe, inclusive, and supportive environment where our children and society may thrive. I'm going to end with a short video, but I want to preface it by saying, to the 7-year-old boy at the park who shouted to my son, "Hey, you can't drive that princess car, it's for girls. Hey, it's all good. You can come play with us too." Are you done? All right, all. I hope you have a great rest of your week and month and do good. Take good care.